All right, when the fire alarm went off, we were trying to demonstrate sword forms and techniques and good blade angle and teach a little bit of Japanese along the way. Actually, that's one of the people we missed. We had one person who spoke Japanese and she's gone. No, that's good. That means I can make up whatever I want. There's nobody to tell you otherwise. Once a samurai was competent using a sword, could make cuts at full power and movement, and I don't want to skip all of it because I want you to see, and does anybody watch the show Forged in Fire? It's awesome. I started off watching the show hating it because I wasn't the guy that got to test the blades, and I wanted Doug Markitis' job. Like, he's a Kali, he doesn't know anything about swords. But with all the sword stuff going on, sometimes good technique gets lost because we don't use swords in life or death situations anymore. I mean, if you're sitting out there and you've used a sword in a life or death situation, you need better friends. But for a lot of people, as you're swinging swords around, a lot of bad technique has crept into swordplay because it's not done for real. And in Japan, when they did diagonal cuts, called keisagiri for the samurai, it was named after the hem on a monk's robe. That was the angle the sword was swung at. When you swing keisagiri with a two-handed weapon, both hands on the sword going this way, the rule was you always cut away from your lead leg. Does that make sense? So if I'm going to cut right to left, from here I'm going to step forwards and cut. So the sword is always moving away from my front leg. Cutting towards your front leg, not only is it biomechanically not as sound, it's much more dangerous. And I'm not talking about one-handed, okay? If you're holding a shield in one hand and you're swinging with the other, your shoulder can rotate forwards. So it's actually, profile-wise, extended further out. I know, this is our stage show and I'm teaching class. Fire alarm, reset button, no more wigs. Not for this. You don't cut towards your lead leg. And in World War II, Japanese officers were still carrying the katana. They were remounted in hangars, so they hung edge down. And they weren't expecting to use the blades. But in the Pacific Theater in World War II, the fighting in the Philippine Islands got so intense and so prolonged, they ran out of supplies. So you'd have people fighting using rifles, not just the bayonets, but the buttstocks to strike with. And the Marine Corps put out a handout sheet, a little pamphlet that got sent over. So all of our servicemen had this rule. If you find a guy with the sword, shoot him first. Yeah. And a lot of people who teach sword class go, see? The sword was more valuable than a gun. I beg to differ. I like both. Because this one you don't run out of ammo on. The other one has more reach and reloads faster. But the reason why they did that was twofold. One was because fighting in the trenches when you're out of weapon, out of ammo, guys are using swords to tremendous effect. But also, it was just the Japanese officers that carried the sword. So if you shot the officer, the men fighting didn't have somebody giving them good directions and orders. But the downside to the Japanese not being prepared to fight with swords, they had a fabulous weapon, but not a lot of training in it. And there are over 100 cases in U.S. history from World War II of medical logs for our U.S. hospitals treated over 100 sword-related injuries from Japanese prisoners. Think about that. The Japanese people were treated because they had sword injuries. U.S. soldiers did not carry swords in the Philippines. They had a variety of knives, the trench knife, and so, but they didn't carry swords. So if they didn't inflict the injuries, how did the Japanese people get hurt by swords? They hit themselves, yeah. And that was partly because of bad technique, where you're cutting towards your lead leg. If you hit something, it deflects in. And bad things happen when you hit yourself in the inside of the leg with a sword. The femoral artery runs right up.
Now you're just stalling, because it's time for me to swing this at you.
Yeah. Stop it! cheer something I do. They cheer me about to get beat up or something.
Woo!
That's the best part.
Okay, that was more disturbing than just the... After a samurai was competent using a sword on his own, it was time to learn what to do when somebody else has a sword and attacks them. Because without training, normal human response to some psycho blonde jumping at you with a 3-foot sharpened razor blade looks like this. No, don't kill me! It's the giggling part that bothers me. That's not part of our show. Okay, what you just saw was the flinch response. It's about one step up from the fetal position. And just to be clear, not only was the fetal position of no use on the battlefield, it will not help you in your dating life either. Because when she gets angry at you, and she will, there's nothing you can do about it. When she gets angry, that frying pan, did anybody see Tangled?
Yeah.
Frying pans, who knew, right? I don't
Lord of
need
the
to keep
Rings,
sword. I
too.
send all my students to Walmart, come back with a frying pan.
Lord of the Rings,
When they
too.
get mad, that frying pan's not going over there, it's not going over there, it's coming right down Broadway. Because on a non-blonde, that's a legal injury.
Coming down Broadway now, dear.
So that brings us to the part where you don't just go, no, don't hit me. So the samurai had to come up with, how do you stop the sword? And this is a shout out to the greatest movie of it. No, we don't do that. Were you not at the mixed up martial arts panel last night? We talked about that. This is a Darwin Award. Always presented posthumously. They did an episode on Mythbusters showing you couldn't actually do that just barehanded. Yeah, you can do it once.
And only
Somewhere
once.
your skull will stop the blade. But see, this is a shout out to our favorite movie of all time, The Karate Kid. That's right, the original. Not the one that came out as the Kung Fu Kid everywhere else in the world, except America, where they just assume we're too stupid to know China and Japan are two different countries. I know the difference. One of them cooks their food. Look, I'm an Iowa farm kid. I love fish, but let's cook it. All right, so, Karate Kid. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Show me paint the face. Wow.
Wax on, wax off.
Normally the audience, even though that's rhetorical, I get half of the audience doing this with me. None of you want to join me. It was the wig, wasn't it? Right, that really cool block was never intended to be used against a sword. Some psycho jumps out at you. If the best thing you can think of is this,
Hey, wall, wax on.
arm off. That sword was designed to go entirely through the human body. Throwing your arm out in the way is a sort of stunt you can only do once.
Yep.
Twice.
Right.
Two arms! Hey, ya!
Look, I was told that here in North Carolina, that's considered a Darwin Award.
Can we talk about Darwin here?
Yeah, we're far enough from Kansas. It's okay.
You laugh. 10 years ago, the school boards in Kansas had this huge debate. It got national attention where they were trying to decide whether they should teach creation and evolution in science or just one, and then if so, which one? So Darwin jokes were not funny in Kansas. You know how I found that out? I was in Kansas. We were performing and there was some lady sitting, well, right about where you are. And she got mad at me during the show. Not mad like you guys are like, this is an hour I'll never get back out of my life. She got mad at me on an epic scale. You know how your mom gets mad at you? Have you ever had your mom, raise your hand if you ever had your mom get mad at you. If you're not raising your hand, you're lying or adopted. And before you get offended, I'm adopted. And I still raise my hand because my mom still got mad. This way, when your mom gets mad at you, it always goes through phases. Phase one is this. Just a blank face, but if there were a dialogue bubble above you, it would say, oh no, you did not just go there. Stage two. See, now we get some nervous giggles. Stage 3. And then when this happens, when the finger of doom comes forward, you've had it. This woman got mad at me during our show, and she went through I was just having fun with it, because at least somebody's paying attention. And finally, I made the Darwin joke, and she started screaming at me. Hey! You can't say that, do you know where you are? I'm like, I'm on stage. It's like, you're in Kansas, you know what that means? And I went, got it, we'll talk slower. We were not invited back. We're back to that. All right, fine. After some trial and error and weeding Darwin Award winners out of the gene pool, the samurai learned this amazing concept that we're going to share with you today. If someone swings a razor-sharp piece of steel at your head, the best thing you can do is move. Well, I didn't say it was rocket science, but I teach this for a living. Do you know what it's hard to get my students to do? Move! Get out of the way! So the sword comes in, and you're not there. There's a drop off there. Stop it! The sword comes, and as long as you and the sword are not stopping. I am sitting out here. No! Look, fire alarms aside, bad wigs aside, our show is still billed, loosely billed, but billed as educational entertainment. So I make bad jokes, but we teach actual martial science. Attack comes down the center line. Tai Sabaki, Japanese, it means body movement. Get out of the way. I say it. This person goes, sword comes in, don't be there. Got it, makes sense. We demonstrate it once and you got it figured out. After the second time, the college kid figures it out. And by the third time, even the dumbest person in the room, even they figured it out. You didn't stop after 3.
No.
You just kept chasing me. And what? That's no longer education, that's abuse. I didn't sign on for abuse.
Yes, you did. You married me.
And we're back to that.
The show must go on.
No, it doesn't.
Fine. Will you continue the show if you get to play with your sword?
Shame on you! The worst part is there wasn't even a hesitation before you laughed at that one. You were just like, she made a bad joke! That reminds me, I would just like to point out right now, probably an hour too late, if you are a parent in the audience, if your child understands this level of innuendo, you're a bad parent. Where'd my cutting stand? There! Was it over there to start with?
Yes.
She moved it on.
No, she didn't. That was it.
Really?
Yeah.
Did the room move when we went out?
No, it's you.
Don't tell the guy with head trauma that. I'll believe you. Alright, this is my favorite part of the show.